Okay, this meeting is called to order. Will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Studebaker.
Here.
Councilors Wendland.
Here.
Kohlhoff.
Here.
Mans.
Here.
O'Neill.
Here.
Lamont.
Here.
And Nguyen.
Here.
All right, would you stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Anne Marie, any citizen comment?
No citizen comment.
Okay. So we have no citizen comment. Next is our presentations, the first one of which is the Historic Preservation Month Awards. Mr. Espy. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Just the mic here. Okay. I need the little clicker thing, too.
Let me start. During this time each year, we like to acknowledge our citizens and volunteers on the Historic Resources Advisory Board and other members of the preservation community for their hard work in preserving the city's historic and architectural past. So Mr. Espy, Paul Espy, will provide a brief presentation.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Yes, indeed, May is National Historic Preservation Month, and it's a time when people across America celebrate their history, culture, and special places. It's sponsored annually by the National Trust for Historic Preservation since 1973, and it's designed to raise awareness about the power historic preservation has to protect and enhance our historic communities and community authenticity. I have with me this evening Shar Green, Vice Chair of the Historic Resources Advisory Board, Casey Howarda, Jeannie McGuire, and other members who wish to recognize Pat Kessie of the PHK Development for his work on the restoration of the Oswego Shopping Center tile mosaics, and Mark Brown for his outstanding contribution to the city's written historic record. Nancy Nyland is here with us this evening, and she is the Executive Director for the Oswego Heritage Council, and she'll be accepting the award for Dr. Brown this evening. So each year, the Historic Resources Advisory Board presents merit awards to those individuals who have made significant contributions to the city's preservation efforts. Usually they look like the one that is at the top of the screen, but we have one in a different species in the form of a bronze plaque today because we have kind of a unique presentation for this award. And so the Weiser family commissioned artist Walter Graham to install two mosaics into the former Lake Oswego Shopping Center in 1960. They served as a celebration and illustrated the city's sense of place for over 50 years. The Windward Development Company, led by Pat Kessie, has honored Lake Oswego's history by fulfilling a promise made by the city's preservation community over 3 years ago. In turn, PHK Development reached out to Jason Jones, and he is a Portland-based sculptor who preserves old artwork for future generations to restore the mosaics. And he went through quite an elaborate process to source all the tiles and hang them up in his studio to restore these tile mosaics to the point where they are today. The mosaics are now on display in their new home in the entrance of the public parking garage at the Windward Mixed-Use Project, and they looked really great there. The city and the Lake Oswego Historic Resources Advisory Board are grateful for the successful effort Mr. Kessie and Mr. Jones, their part to restore and preserve this important piece of the city's municipal history. So Shar can present the award to Mr. Kessie, and again, it's rather heavy, so.
Wow.
This is big as a mosaic. Right.
Okay, and this year, HRAB is also honoring Dr. Mark Brown with a Preservation Merit Award for his dedication and research skills in archiving Lake Oswego's written history. Mark moved to Lake Oswego with his wife after retiring after a long career of dentistry and began volunteering at the Oswego Heritage Museum. He thought this would be a fairly easy activity to occupy his spare time, but he quickly realized there was a heck of a lot more to it than met the eye. According to Mark, the Oswego Heritage Council's vault contained over 14,000 historical documents, photos, and other memorabilia from 26 Lake Oswego's famous families. And then there are also the city records. He says that everything from the type of paving stones on the original streets to a 1906 petition to get rid of cows on A Avenue. Mark is a self-taught archivist who has been involved with the physical renovations of the Heritage House, helping to add a new museum area, archive and research room. And then he also worked with the Heritage Council on Our Legacy, Our Future project. And this is a history project that documented the history of the former Christie School on the Marylhurst campus. And as you know, this was a school for orphan girls, and it's located on Marylhurst, and it was established more than 100 years ago and took care of kids almost just about during that whole time. Mark has been involved in all kinds of other projects over the years, too many to mention this evening, but again, Nancy Nyland will be accepting the award for Mark this evening, and Shari, if you can.
Get too close now.
One more? One more? Perfect. Thank you. And that pretty much just concludes. Just to close out, though, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that the Oswego Heritage Council will be having their Heritage Home and Garden Tour on June 2nd at 11 a.m. from 4 p.m. I hope I have that right.
11 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Yes, okay, great. Okay, and that concludes our ceremony for this evening.
I just think, Councilor,
Quick question, or a quick note. While we have Pat Kessie here, I also want to thank him for the whole city for helping us save the Weiser lights. You directed your staff, your team, to help us get that with the Historic Resource Advisory Board, Paul, David Powell, Anthony Hooper, Ivan Anderholm, everybody pitched in and we got them saved. We don't know what we're going to do with them yet, but we have them saved. And that was another historic preservation initiative you did, and I want to thank you for that.
All right.
okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
See you guys. Thank you. Thanks for the recognition.
Thank you.
You don't want to stick around for the rest of the meeting?
Having a presentation by Carolyn Lewis from Metro. Thank you for coming and joining us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And for the record, my name is Christine Lewis. I'm Metro Councilor representing District 2, including this community. And I'm just really delighted to be here tonight, and I hope to make a regular practice of coming by to say hi, not only tell you what I'm up to, but also to learn what you're working on. So, new faces. You will recognize that at least 3 of us are brand new and shiny. We were sworn in 4 months ago, so we'll play the new card for at least one more day. But sworn in January alongside Council President Peterson, who should be familiar to all of you as a proud Lake Oswegian, and also Juan Carlos Gonzalez, representing District 4 in Washington County, joined the Metro Council this past January. One of the most important things that we're working on right now is our Parks and Nature program. And we need to highlight some of the work that we've done in the past. And one exciting development is we have opened I believe in February of this year, our new regional park at Oxbow Welcome Center. So if you ever go out to Oxbow, summertime's a great time to do so. Make sure to visit the Welcome Center. It's really putting Oxbow in the crown jewels of our regional park system. The center features informational displays about the park, geology, plants and animals, as well as art reflective of the surroundings. So really lovely space. As we are speaking, we are in the process of discussing as council, going out to voters for a renewal of our Parks Bond. Parks Bond was last passed in 2006, and our current discussion is for a renewal at the current rate. This would likely be referred to this November's ballot. We've had intense discussion, and we are going to have a draft framework by the end of next week with our goal of getting to a June referral. So what is it exactly we're discussing? We are going to continue with our success in land acquisition and restoration, which is the hallmark of our Metro Park system, but we're also going to be investing in improvements in Metro Parks, facilities like the ones at Oxbow. We will continue with community grants and local government allocations. And one thing we discussed at our meeting today along the lines of local government allocations is that match ratio, which used to be 2-to-1. We might be loosening that up a little bit just to get more dollars out into community. We will also have 2 new areas of funding. One is trails, so not only investing in parks, but trails that connect people to nature and natural area to natural area. And then also a bucket we're calling advancing large-scale community visions. The hallmark of that would be funding for the Willamette Falls Legacy Project. So we're having discussions right now about the values that we're bringing to the bond and the bond referral itself. And I would love to connect with any of you if you have ideas. Again, we're at a very timely point as we're getting ready for referral. But what we've done to protect our natural areas, to protect water, fish, and stream habitat is really critical for our climate resiliency and for the health of our communities. Next, Metro runs our regional garbage and recycling programs, and a couple of news points. One, last July, Metro Council adopted a regional requirement for businesses to separate food scraps from garbage starting in 2020, and local jurisdictions under that adopted ordinance need to be working by July 31 of this year to put their program in place. I know Lake Oswego is such a leader on recycling and food scraps in particular, but wanted to make sure you knew that the rest of the region is following. Metro is also coordinating with local governments and developing a regional communication strategy to reduce contamination in our home garbage and recycling stream. We know that there's a lot of concern both from the heightened news stories, but also real evidence of other areas around the state where the export problem has come into play. So we are going to be leading a communication strategy to make sure people know how to recycle and are reducing our waste as much as possible. And then finally, on March 7th, Metro Council adopted our regional waste plan for 2030. The plan serves as our vision for the region's garbage and recycling system, and it acts as a blueprint for achieving that vision up until 2030. And we will be working with local governments both on prioritization of those features, we can't do it all at once, and also on implementation. Transportation. We are looking at the opportunity to put together a transportation measure for November of 2020. And we took a poll of voters in the region just to get a little snapshot of the appetite. And we found that it is a high priority amongst voters in the region to reduce congestion and that there's a willingness to pay. This by no means makes a 2020 ballot measure a slam dunk, and we have a lot of work to do to build a transportation measure that the voters can trust and support. One of the main takeaways from the poll is that whatever we do, it needs to be a program that can help everyone, no matter which modalities they like to use to get around. And we've appointed a 35-member steering committee. It's a transportation task force that is underway with identifying corridors. Corridors have been identified and the scoring system has begun. The next step along these corridors is to start to identify projects. The project identification is both going to be based off of what's in the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan, but also anything new that's come across the board or that with new funding could be accelerated or brought up the prioritization. So everything's on the table in terms of the projects on these corridors. And each county will have a citizen group of 6 to 8 people thereabout that help to put together the prioritized projects along corridors for Metro staff to then start doing modeling off of. So that work is going to start next month. So I will definitely be interested in making sure that Lake Oswego and the west side of the county have good representation in that Clackamas County kind of advisory group. But the task force has had 5 successful meetings, and I believe another one is scheduled for the next couple of weeks. The task force is still where the conversation is happening.
It's a 35-member task force?
35 members, yes.
Is that the T-2020?
It's the T-2020 task force.
That works?
35 members is a lot. They are pretty equally split between government officials, folks who represent the business community, and then advocates for all different modalities. And there are obviously 3 different cultures that are coming into play there as well. So it's not only the size of the group, but how different people walk in and are prepared. But we have a professional facilitator that's helping, and so far the meetings have been intense, but have been productive. It's a big room. I wanted to give you a quick update on affordable housing. I think most of you were at the city's dinner that y'all were so generous to host, so you know as much as I do about where we are since we heard the update from Clackamas County. But for the benefit of everybody here, we are at the point in, Metro Council voted in January to appoint 13 people to our oversight committee to facilitate this, the program funded by Portland, our region's $652.8 million affordable housing bond that passed last November. That advisory committee has, as of last week, seen some of the first thoughts from Clackamas County, and that process is now moving through the county in order for all of our jurisdictions here in Clackamas County to participate in spending the bond dollars. We want to make sure that local plans have reasonable proposals so that each jurisdiction is not only getting their share of the funds and the support, but also helping meet our overall goals that we've promised to the voters. And this work is going to take time, and as you know, it can go months from concept to permitting to construction, months, years. But we're excited that we're able to offer each jurisdiction one pilot project that can move forward quickly. And council approved Clackamas County's pilot project last week, which is actually a retention and rehab to make sure that folks are able to stay in apartment complex here in Clackamas County. So again, this is a process where metro, cities, and county are all working together, since we don't have cities in Clackamas County with their own housing authorities. So. Wanted to make sure that you were aware that Metro's grant programs for this spring, both of them have already closed, but want to start working on getting ahead for next year. We have a 2040 Planning and Development Grant that is available to cities and jurisdictions to help create equitable housing and economic opportunities it's a planning grant to make sure that communities are preparing for their future. And the closing date was actually the end of April. The other type of grant is a community placemaking grant. And the community placemaking grants support creative projects that empower and involve community members to make sure they have a voice in changes that may shape their neighborhoods. The community placemaking grants are on tomorrow's MPAC agenda. And those awards generally go to community groups, not to government agencies. One of my goals is for next year's process to make sure that we're getting that grant application out to more organizations in Clackamas County. I was on the review committee. We didn't see a lot of Clackamas County applications. So I will be coming back this fall, asking for your help in making sure that applicable organizations are getting the notice. I want to make sure that District 2 is represented in those applications. And then finally, Metro does a lot more that we don't talk about all the time at government meetings. We manage an expo center, a convention center, and Portland Center 5. So if you'd like to check out the expo center, there's an alpaca show coming up. And we also have a great summer lineup at the Schnitzer, including Boys to Men, other things that might float your boat, available on the website as well. And with that, I'm always interested in being in community. So if there are things you want to invite me to, if there are things we need to work together on, just delighted to be here and work with you all.
You're certainly welcome to join us at any of our events.
Well, thank you.
We have a couple of questions. Councilor Mann, you had a question?
Well, mostly a comment. Thank you very much for bringing up pathways and trails. That's a passion
Yes.
of mine and a goal of the councils this year. Parks as well. I'm on the Willamette Falls Heritage Area Board, so I have a particular interest in what's going on in that part of our region. So excited for all that you're doing.
Yeah.
So I would, be happy to have an offline conversation and give you my thoughts, at least, on anything that we're doing here in the city, and perhaps you can give me a heads up as to what we should be doing.
That'd be great. I look forward to working with you on all of the energy. I mean, between the Legacy Project, the locks, the Heritage Area application at the federal level, all the stars are aligning. So yes, let's stay close on that.
That's awesome. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you.
Councilor Kohlhoff.
So I want everybody to know that I actually see Councilor Lewis a lot because she shows up at every meeting that she's assigned to, so it's pretty amazing. And since I picked up Councilor Goodman's committees, I actually do see Councilor Lewis a lot. So my question, though, was when you were discussing the appointment of the 6 per county, as I understood you, were they going to come out of the T2020 group, or was that yet another group that was going to be appointed?
It's another group that will advise the T2020 process. So we will have the opportunity potentially to have some of the folks from Clackamas County who sit at that table also be the community members, but more than likely, we have 6 to 8 new folks who are going to be pulled into this process. And their goal is not to look at the regional package. Their goal is to focus in on the corridors that scored well in Clackamas County. And the corridors, each one is going to have, maybe we need to do different curb cuts for a bus there. Maybe we need to do a bike lane there. Maybe we need to add capacity in this way. So they're going to compile what are the options and how do they all fit together for
So
each of those
ultimately,
corridors.
the T2020 people will then take that guidance and then make their final recommendation.
That's right. It'll go through a professional modeling process at that point that the local folks won't have to balance with the competing budget and kind of regional distribution.
So when does T2020 end, do you suspect? What's the expectation?
I think that
December
T2020
31st.
task force will advise us the entire way through the process. So
okay.
the T2020 task force, they're starting right now with identifying, here's the regional need. Along that regional need, what are the projects? And then once we start to model the projects, we'll come up with what the costs are, what cost containments can be done, and then how do we pay for it?
That's exciting. Thank you.
It's exciting, it's a lot, and I know it's moving really quickly, so, yeah.
Councilor Lamont.
So on the same note, if I understand it right, when folks submitted the corridor ideas, it wasn't necessarily that they had to be ready for construction, but they also needed a plan. I think some of them are in there that needing planning money, is that correct?
Planning money's part of it, yes.
Yeah, so it's not like the federal infrastructure thing about 7, 8 years ago, where they just said, you got to be ready to go to construction tomorrow.
That's
So
right.
we have talked about, we haven't put Route 43 in for anything. And from West Lynn's border to Portland, if it's too late with this T2020 process, is it eligible for a grant next spring to get some corridor planning and design going, like West Lynn did?
Yeah, so the traditional funding mechanisms the federal pass-through, still on the table. But 43 did go up. It is one of the corridors. I will say, compared to a few of the other corridors in Clackamas County, it was a low rank. C2C in East Clackamas County was high ranking. Moderate ranking was additional modalities along 205. And then 43, of those, we had some that were full out cut. It's one of the lowest still on the table. That doesn't mean that we won't be able to fund part of it or have a program overlay. There will be likely programmatic elements to the measure that will touch many more roads than just the few corridors that cut kind of the full package.
So
So
if we-
43 is being studied
By Metro.
by Metro and
Okay.
the T2020 task force.
So to follow up, to get, pedestrian crossings, an access point to Foothill, to clean up this access stuff off of Tryon Cove, all these elements that are still floating around, that's what we'd be going for through you to get a plan for all of that together. Is that right?
Yes.
That
And
would
you
be
can,
great.
even while this process is ongoing, you can still be in the ready for applying for planning grants through our traditional funding mechanisms.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Thank you.
yeah.
Other questions? Thank you very much. We appreciate your coming in and getting us informed.
Great
Yeah.
update.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is council business, the first of which is Resolution 19-20.
I don't know how to follow an announcement that Boys to Men is coming to town. My middle school fantasies are coming true. My topic's not as exciting as that. I'm here to talk about Resolution 1920, which would authorize the city manager's office to sign I'm Jenny Slepian, Sustainability Analyst, sorry.
My name's Josh Halley. I'm a product manager at Portland General Electric.
And we are here to talk about Resolution 1920, which is to authorize the city manager's office to enter in an agreement with PGE to purchase renewable energy directly from a new 100 megawatt facility through what is called a direct power purchase agreement. The term of the contract would be for 15 years. The city would receive the agreed upon capacity and energy credits from the facility, which would likely be a wind generation distribution plant. We recommend that we enter into this agreement to cover 55% of our energy usage. The remainder, we would still be renewable, 100% renewable. The rest of our power usage would be covered by the state's renewable portfolio standard, which increases over time, and then renewable energy credits, which we already buy through the Clean Winds program. We currently pay $3 per megawatt hour for participation in the Clean Winds program. Under the new contract for the power purchase agreement, we would pay a maximum, and it could be lower than this, $2 per megawatt hour. Whatever price is agreed upon at the time of the contract will remain fixed for the term of the contract, so we know what we would be paying for 15 years, so there wouldn't be any variation under that like we currently have. There is a graph on page 4 of your staff report that explains what that energy mix might look like over the term of the contract, so you can see that the 55% remains the same, and then as the state's renewable power standard increases over time, the amount of variable renewable energy credits that would make up part of that mix will decrease. A little bit of background, we have been buying Clean Winds from PGE since 2015. Last year, we spent $41,000 on Clean Winds. We increased the number of accounts that participate in this in 2018. I do want to be clear that we buy Clean Winds for 100% of our eligible accounts. Not all of our city energy accounts are eligible for renewable energy credits. Under the power purchase agreement, any of our city accounts would be eligible. It's up to us to determine what we want. So that flexibility is nice. So where this came from is in March, PGE approached us to see if we would like to enter this. So this is the first round of subscribers that this is open to. We would enter the agreement as a subscriber. We would own the capacity and energy credits produced by the facility. And this would be effective from 2021 to 2035. There's some further information about this mix that's in the staff report, and if you want me to go into detail, I can. I'm afraid that I will lose you, and there's a Blazers game that starts in half an hour, so I know what the priorities are of this room. I have recommended that we buy green tariffs for 55% because I don't want us to be in a position where we may be overcommitting to the amount of renewables that we're purchasing. So by the time that 15 years is up, the renewable portfolio standard, which is the state's requirement that there be a certain amount in PGE's energy mix that is renewable, and we already pay for that in our rates. It's not optional, it's not on top of what we already pay for, it's just already in there. We don't want to buy more green tariffs than what the renewable portfolio standard is providing. So that 55 and 45 will meet to make 100% renewable for our city accounts. We did a little analysis to try to figure out how much this might cost over the term of the contract. We did an analysis of what our energy mix might look like over the next 15 years, and it's really hard to say. There's a lot of variables. On one hand, we'll have a much more efficient city hall that will also be producing its own renewable energy. On the other hand, we'd like to move to a more electric fleet, so that will increase some of our energy demands. We're not sure yet about the wastewater treatment plant, so I've just left that out. I've left out anything that Parks might do in terms of a new facility, because again, we have no idea yet what we're doing with that. So anything that seemed a little unsure, I'm just recommending that we not include those accounts in this green tariff. Overall, I think our energy usage will go down because we have invested in a lot of energy efficiency projects through LED lighting in our facilities, through improved HVAC systems, through LED street lighting. Rachel Peterson has suggested that even if we had a fully electric fleet, at this point, I think there's only 17 vehicles that could be electric very quickly that we charge at night to use off-peak rates. So there's a lot that we can do to minimize our overall power usage. There are some alternatives that you can consider. The first option to consider is that we do this, that we enter this agreement with PGE. The advantage is that we could say that we are 100% renewable. The great thing about it too is that we're not buying renewable energy credits, which can come from anywhere in the country. We're supporting the Northwest renewable energy economy by being subscribers to one particular facility, which is a really interesting and new opportunity. The disadvantage is that we still have to figure out exactly what the cost will be, although we know that the cost per megawatt hour is much less than what we're already paying. Option 2 is to enter the power purchase agreement, but at a lower percentage than 55%. We won't be overbuying, but it does leave a little bit more that we're paying for renewables, but at a higher rate. So we'd be buying the same amount of renewable energy credits, which end up costing us more, and there's no fixed price for that. Or we can do nothing and just continue with what we're doing, which is purchasing clean wind for all of our eligible accounts. There is a little fiscal impact graph for you where Josh and I spent some time really trying to figure it out. And as you can see that over the term of the contract, the amount that we would spending, roughly, this is an estimate based on our current energy usage right now. Right now, as I said, we're spending $41,000 a year on clean winds. By the years 2030 to 2034, we would be spending $18,000 a year on renewables total. And that's because so much of our usage would be at that fixed rate, which is lower. So that's basically where we are with that. There is a pricing methodology that Josh can explain. The next steps for this would be, if we pass this resolution, then we will work with the city attorney's office on the agreement. We need to make a decision by May 31st, which is when this opens up through PGE. It's first come, first serve. So whoever's in the door is wanting to be a subscriber first gets their first shot. Basically, it's other municipalities around the region and then a few large businesses as well that are interested in doing this. So it's new, it's exciting, it's something that's only available in a handful of states. And it'd be an interesting opportunity.
Questions, anybody? Councilor Lamont?
So if I got this right, if we were paying traditional rates, PG rates, that would be one number. But because we've bought into the Clean Wind program, we're paying $41,000 more than traditional rates, correct?
Correct.
So if we were to change to this program, the 41,000 goes away, and then we would be working our way down as the years go on because of the fixed rate and the expansive program. We would be contributing to some sort of a new renewable plant of some sort. We think it's going to be wind, it could be other renewables, but it's going to be fixed rather than up and down trying to figure out what to get involved in. It's very complicated, as you know, when you go through this, it's really complicated. It's amazing you guys put this chart together. So we basically are lowering the cost to be more of a renewable community over time, and then contributing to the state and the Pacific Northwest doing better with renewables. Is that right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
Yeah, if I could add to that,
Yeah,
just
sure.
a second. The cool thing about this product, and I've been working in renewable products for about 15 years, is that it has a feature called additionality that is something that we're hearing from more and more of our customers that are interested in. Rather than buying renewables from a facility that has already been built, this project is this commitment, in concert with commitments from other customers that are kind of banding together as subscribers, essentially, you're going to make a new facility happen that would not have otherwise been built. And the impact of a decision like that is something that, there's only a handful of states where that's something that's available through the utility. It's been really cutting-edge work on the part of PGE and our PUC to be able to offer something like this. And this is the first round that we're offering of it. So it's an opportunity to demonstrate your leadership as a city, your commitment to renewable energy, and more than that, to be able to point for the next 15 years to a facility that you can claim you made happen with your commitment. That's the power of a product like this and a project like this, is that ability to point to it and claim ownership of a facility that, well, like I said, wouldn't have happened otherwise. So that's another feature that's worth considering as you think about this.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Wendland?
So in the world of energy, is 15 years forever? Or is this, I mean, are we getting into something, say in 10 years, if all of a sudden somebody comes up with the perfect solar panel and I mean, are there any points along the way that we would have vulnerability in signing a 15-year contract?
I'll let Josh answer that.
Sure. It's a firm commitment of either 15 years. There's a 10-year option that is available as well. It's a higher price for the 10-year option, so there's an opportunity to save money by going longer. We don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what technology will be in place in 15 years, but what I can tell you is that we're at an interesting point in renewable energy development. For the majority of my career, it's been a safe bet that next year will be cheaper than this year. That reality is becoming a little bit more doubtful as we've continued to add efficiency to solar and wind, and the prices have absolutely come down quite a bit in the last 15 years. The returns on efficiency over time in the next 15 years are potentially in more question. We haven't seen a huge drop in wind power prices in the last year or two, like we were seeing 10 years ago as technology was evolving. The other key element to the current timing in this situation is that there are fairly generous tax incentives available through the federal government for both wind and solar, the production tax credit and the investment tax credit respectively. And those are set to expire over the next couple of years as incentives are sort of rolling back. And currently the projects that we're considering for this product are going to be able to take advantage of those tax incentives in a way that in a couple of years will not be possible. And so there's an opportunity right now to build for as low of a cost as we're expecting in the coming years. And that's something that part of the reason why we're moving quickly on this is to be able to take advantage of those tax incentives and bring the project in at a lower cost, allowing our participants to enjoy those costs as well.
So you don't see in the 15-year horizon that it'll go from 2 down to 1, say?
Well, actually, it's interesting you mentioned those numbers specifically because the language in the contract currently is not to exceed. We are currently negotiating with potential projects. There is an opportunity for the price on this project to come down and this product to come down potentially to that $1 number. I can't promise that
Or
currently.
whatever, but I mean, so
Sure.
we would
Yeah.
realize the change if it went from $2 to $1.50 or whatever, or we stuck it to
The terms on the
15
contract
years.
are a flat, fixed price, and that's the way that we're able to bring on a new project, is to commit to purchase all of the output from that facility for a 15-year period. Minus that type of commitment from either a utility or subscribers, the project would not happen. So that's essentially, how the power industry works. There's no way I can guarantee you that prices won't come down during that period of time, but likewise, I can't guarantee that they won't go up.
Right. No,
Generally,
I understand that. It's just like the airlines hedge on fuel contracts. We're kind of doing the same thing with electricity then.
Sure.
Okay.
Other questions? I have a couple of questions. What's the useful life of a windmill?
Depends on if you're basing that off of warranty or useful life. The conversation's
My understanding is it's about 15 years, is that correct?
No, the warranty is typically about 30 years on a wind turbine. But that can change based on the model and what the technology is. A power purchase agreement typically is in a 15 to 20-year period. That's about the smallest increment that you can do a power purchase agreement currently.
One other thing, have you guys been able to develop some kind of methodology to reduce the number of birds and that kind of stuff that are killed by these things?
Yeah, that's been a big focus of the wind industry over the last 15 years. It's certainly important to the industry to not be having as little impact on the environment as possible. It's partly why you've seen the design of a wind turbine evolve over time, and the environmental permitting process in order to place a wind farm in a certain location has gotten far more stringent. We typically do about a 1-year assessment on a facility and the site before we determine whether it's a good spot to build. When I say we, I'm speaking sort of in general about the wind industry. We monitor and we keep our products to what's called the Green E standard. It's a national standard that verifies wind and renewable energy products. And one of the parts of that certification that we go through every year is they verify the facilities that we purchase from and what those facilities, what kind of impact they have on the environment. So unlike, say, some of the wind farms in the early 80s in California that were placed in fairly unfortunate locations as pertaining to bird migration patterns, that's something that you have to look at these days. Any impact to any type of endangered species, is something that we have to take a look at. I can tell you, we own the Bigelow Wind Farm, which is one I can quote you on. The avian mortality rate at the Bigelow Wind Farm, the last I checked, which was a couple years ago, was about 0.3 birds per turbine per year.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I'd entertain a motion to, on resolution, ordinance 28, no, it's resolution 1920. I'll make a motion we approve resolution 1920.
Second?
Second, any further discussion? Or any discussion at all? Okay.
So pretty much, this is a good thing. I mean, we've had the presentation, but no discussion. Is this, you think, good? Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Next item is ordinance 2812, annexing property at, on Bonita and Meadows Road.
Thank you, Mayor. You have to read the ordinance title. This is an ordinance annexing the city of Lake Oswego 7 parcels in the adjacent Meadow Avenue public right-of-way, consisting of 5 acres at 5165 Carman Drive, 5195 Bonita Road, 5215 Bonita Road, 5200 Meadows Road, 4950 Meadow Avenue, 4948 Meadow Avenue, and 1 parcel with no Situs address at tax lot 21E07AB00700. Declaring City of Lake Oswego zoning and resource protection district pursuant to LOC 500104.58C and removing the territory from certain districts. The council had a public hearing on March 5th on this matter and received some testimony. You'll recall this is an island annexation under state law where it does not require consent. And this consists of a commercial property and 6 residentially zoned parcels. And at the close of the hearing, the council allowed additional written testimony for a week period and then deliberated on the 19th of March. Your tentative decision was to approve the annexation as proposed, but you did modify it to make the effective date for the residentially zoned properties 10 years from the date of the ordinance as opposed to the mandated 3 years under state law. Other than that, the decision was to approve it as presented. So the ordinance before you tonight, ordinance 2812, finalizes that tentative decision and adopts findings and conclusions. Staff recommendation is to enact the ordinance, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Have anybody have any questions of Mr. Powell.
Move to enact ordinance 2812.
Second.
All right, we've motion made and second. Is there any discussion? Councilor Kolhoff.
The only thing I would say is that I'm going to vote for this, but I think that the 10 years would not have otherwise been my choice and wasn't when we voted before, but I will vote for it as written.
All right, and let the record reflect that Councilor Lamont has recused himself on this. All right, we have motion made and second. No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Can you ask Councilor Lamont to come back in? Or maybe just leave him in.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Yes, please.
You ready for the next item, Mr. Mayor?
Why don't we take a 5-minute break, okay?
Was he in there? Go find him. This is precious time. No, he's good.
was for Anthony, by the way.
Okay, we're back in session. Next, don't laugh at it, Anthony, it just encourages her. Item 6.3 is a wastewater treatment plant service contract for PPP, P3.
PPP.
Yeah,
If I may-
okay.
If I may,
Make
Mr.
your-
Mayor. If I
There
may,
you go.
Mr. Mayor, I'll set it up. My name is Evan Boone, for those well, I think you all know me, but for the listening audience, Evan Boone, Deputy City Attorney. And with me is Anthony Hooper, who is the project manager on the wastewater treatment plant. The council adopted Resolution 1855 back in December, authorizing to move forward on a PPP or a P3, or public-private partnership, or as we attorneys call it, a contract. In order to move forward with statement for solicitation of qualifications for design, build, finance, operate, and maintain a replacement wastewater treatment plant for the Tryon Creek facility. In doing that, we have moved forward in the request for qualifications, and those statements of qualifications were received. We received 4, 3 were identified, we were going to select the top 3, and 3 have been identified. The next step in the process then is to send out a request for proposals. In order to do that, we need to employ the services of a specialized legal services to assist us in developing the P3 agreement. And basically, you're going to have we need to have a discussion about what the terms should be in a pre-development agreement, and you folks are familiar with that in your role as the redevelopment agency. A pre-development agreement, that would then go out with the request for proposals, and then people would submit their proposals, and from that, we would then enter into the pre-development agreement, and then eventually, when one proposer is selected, we'd end up with a development agreement. Well, we're at the initial stage of needing to retain some specialized legal services, and the contract that is before you, and the motion that's before you, is to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood, which was selected through a request for proposal process as outlined in the council report, with 4 submittals as being the top firm to assist us in preparing a P3 agreement for wastewater treatment facilities. As indicated, they have substantial experience in doing precisely that. And I will say that in talking with all of the references that were provided by all of the firms, there was a unanimous voice from all of the clients that the retention of a P3 expert is essential in moving forward with such a project. It is a specialized field, and it's certainly something outside of my experience, and I think Mr. Powell's as well, in preparing such a long-term arrangement dealing with with those 5 aspects of it. So in that, the simple request is to authorize the city manager to sign a contract to employ Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood to provide legal services at the direction of the city attorney. They are on a strictly hourly basis. They have set forth what they think their costs would be moving along in the different phases, but how fast we move in those phases is dependent upon this council and directions by the city attorney then. That's kind of the short summary of it. I can answer any questions if you want.
I have a number of questions.
Okay.
First of all, what we're doing now is sending out a request for proposal from 4 firms, I think, asking for a proposal and 30% design. Is that correct?
Well, I think that's a little ahead of the thing. First, this first issue here is to retain a law firm to help us in assisting to prepare the request for proposals.
Right,
Okay.
but that's what the purpose of this particular effort is, correct?
Right, to ultimately come up with a request for proposals to submit to the 3 shortlisted firms that submitted
Right.
statement to qualification.
Okay, but here's my concern. My concern is each step of this, we're getting a little bit deeper into the whole thing with more commitment to cost and this particular direction. So initially, we're hiring this firm, and they're going to help us prepare a request for proposal for the 3 firms that we're going to, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then the idea is that those three firms will each give us a proposal with 30% design, correct?
That hasn't been decided yet, and that's partly why we need to have the legal firm on board, is to decide whether or not, there's a lot of details we have to decide. One of them could be that all of them give some level of design, we don't know what percentage yet, and that we select one, and then they go on and do 30% or 60%. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made that this legal firm will advise us on. But that is one possibility, but we need them to weigh in. We plan on meeting with them on May 23rd, including one of our other consultants as well, and several other key staff, including somebody from the City of Portland too. And then we're going to make a lot of decisions, but we need to have their expertise in the room in order to make these decisions. And as Evan was, as Deputy Attorney Boone was saying, is that we need them to help us so we're making smart decisions instead of, and that we also.
Anthony, I understand the need for them, okay, if we're gonna go forward.
Yeah.
But my concern is the cost as we go forward, we're putting money into this whole process. So whether they come back with 10% design, 30% design, or whatever, we're asking them to come back with something that we're gonna make a decision on. And if we make a decision to go forward, we're gonna put more money into this thing on the hope that it works out, correct?
Correct.
So when we do this initial, I just want to see if there's some off-ramps as we go through this process, so that if we have a lot of doubts about the efficacy of this procedure, that we can get off and not get ourselves into a quagmire of costs.
Yes.
So I assume that the costs we're spending to develop the proposal, the request for proposal, are not hugely expensive, is that, or can it be? Are we
Not
talking?
compared to the cost of the project, it'll be a small part of the project.
That's still big.
Yeah,
And
what is the
so we
total
won't
amount?
have a significant commitment or investment until we make the decision to go ahead with the contract.
But I understood that initially, anyway, we were talking about several $100,000 for legal
Could
fees.
be, yeah.
Just to develop this request for
Right.
proposal?
But it'll be a $130 million project.
I understand that,
Proceed.
but I'm curious about what kind of costs we're entailing right now just to request proposals. Is it several $100,000?
Well, I guess I would say, first of all, retaining them doesn't cost anything.
I understand that.
Until we direct, all right. The
But
next
we're not
question
going
is.
to retain them unless we're going to ask them to do something.
All right, but then the next question is, when are we going to ask them to do something? So there's a retention question. The next question is, when do we want them to perform services? As Project Manager Hooper indicated, there's a tentative date set for March 23 to make some real project decisions, both with using the expertise of this firm, but I think also, of course, with our P3 consultant, Jill Jameson, in how do you structure the request for proposal and the pre-development agreement that would go out with that. If the estimated cost for the legal services to get through the March 23 hearing, or whenever that occurs, would be about somewhere they estimate between $50,000 and $75,000. So that's a chunk of change. But that's going to occur when this council says we're ready to move forward. So again, we have understood it to be we want to move forward, so that would be on May 23rd. If for some reason the council doesn't want to move on May 23rd, well, that doesn't.
Well, right now, what we're doing is approving the retention of the law firm, but we're not actually saying go ahead and get proposals.
Right.
And will you give us additional information on May 23rd?
Well, it'll be sometime afterwards. We're going to meet on the 23rd, so we need a few days to respond, but
All right,
yes, yeah,
all right, thank you.
yes.
Other question, I got lots of them, okay. Sorry for that.
Should we vote now?
Councilor Koloff.
So the question that I had, and not discussion, but a question, and I raised this before, I'm not wild about adding in the finance. So how baked is this in your heads as you talk with the law firm? And I'm on board with them helping with this prep entirely. But how integral is the finance piece to the design, build, operate, and maintain.
One of the things that attracted me to this company is they've had experience developing hybrid financing, because the problem with completely bond-funded financing is with coverage ratios and things like that, it would have a higher initial impact on our rates, and we're trying to keep our rates where they would be without going this route. With the hybrid, the finance director can work the amount of revenue bonds that we would issue to not hit those points, and the private financing would kind of cover the peaks to avoid, cash flow problems, frankly, for the utility. So I think that's something that really worth exploring. As to whether they'll give us an offer of full financing, but whether we take it or not, it's going to be up to the council.
I don't think I got my question answered. So at this point, how this would be structured, the questions that you would ask would leave open the alternative that we not use that finance piece, that we would structure it without it. And the law firm that we're selecting, which looks like they would be capable of standing on their heads in the middle of the street. I mean, they appear to be very well qualified. We're not locked in, is what I'm trying to say, to include that finance, even though they have had experience with that and you like it. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and just if they have done DBOMs, design, build, operate, maintain, which frankly I think is probably little more normal, because the local governments or the governmental partners will many times take care of the financing on their own. Obviously, they will do an agreement that we direct them to do. So if we decide we want to take financing out of that option, they'll do so.
The question is whether or not the three firms that we have shortlisted would be willing to continue on, and I don't know the answer to that if we were to move the financing piece, because they have submitted their team based upon that being a package of it, and whether it still pencils out, I'm not for them, I don't know. I think that's a question we'd have to ask them to know whether or not they would still move forward.
It is something you want to ask.
Councilor Wendland.
Couple things is, so we're doing this just for Lake Oswego. Is Portland participating in this at all, or so they will help offset costs?
Well, as far as the analysis and the RFP process, no, they're providing staff help, but they're not doing financing at this stage.
So we're not sharing the attorney costs,
Not
that's
at this
on us?
point.
Okay.
It'll be rolled in the overall project financing, though.
Okay, so that was my next question. If this were to go forward, then can we just put these costs into the project?
Right.
So it's not coming out of a budget unless we don't go forward?
Right.
Is that correct? And then when you did say it's a $130 million project, I just have to say that the city has learned on previous projects, the last school bond before in 2001 or 2 or whatever, they didn't measure twice and they cut. And they cut wrong when on some of the projects. And so I think the learning lesson there was that you do have to spend some money on high expertise to get their benefit of experience and so on, because even though I think the two of you are exceptionally qualified, this is not your expertise, and I think it's wise to spend some money to find out the answers. As long as Mayor Studebaker said, we've got off-ramps, I think it's a good project, good expenditure.
Councilor Lamont.
So to follow up the mayor's question, if I got this right from our last meeting, there's no just clean no-go spot that we can say we're going to go with a new plant and then hire all these people. We need the hiring of the experts early in order to inform that decision. Is that correct? And I think the same concern I have is then the attorneys I get, we're working with them to keep informing us what we're getting into. But then going into a 30% with these firms, we would select one, the attorney would guide us in packaging it, then we're off to the races. I mean, then they're going to build it and at least design it up to 30%. Right.
There's still a few decisions that have to be made along those details, but yes, essentially you're right. Yes.
But the no-go has to get the 30% in order to get to the no-go. If it's a no-go, then we're out the attorney money, we're out the consultant team.
Right. It is, we're trying to have the decision points where they make sense. And so this first one, the three firms, will tell them, this is about what we can afford based on what our projections are for the current upgrade option. This is about what we're going to look at that. Can you stay under that? And they'll have to answer yes or no. It may end right there. If they look at it, pencil out. But to get to your point, Councilor, for them to know whether they can get to it, they need to know what that obligation is going to look like. Exactly what is our contract going to be over the long term. And so I think it is a chicken and egg
A
problem.
little good faith on both sides.
Yeah,
And so our option to go back remodel was still on the
Yeah.
table.
We'll, we won't have the full details of the agreement, but they have to know the broad parameters to know if they can make it work themselves. So, it's not unusual to do this, and I think the point's well taken that Councilor Wendland made. The more information we know up front, the better off you will be as a council making decisions, and frankly, Portland as well.
Councilor Meadows.
I think everything has been answered, but I just want to ask one more time on what sort of expertise the attorneys will provide that will allow us to move on to the next step. I understand that this project includes a lot of regulation, but will we then be presented once they've done their work with something that we can look at and say, okay, step two, or what does the flow look like on this?
Well, I'll just start off halfway. I mean, first, whatever date the meeting is, the May 23 meeting, which talked about. I mean,
Right.
that's sort of to go through all the issues.
Okay.
Financing being one of them, and to say, how should we move forward on these? Then the attorneys will take that skeleton, develop that into the pre-development agreement to be included with the RFP. So when that gets developed, then I think the next question would be for the council to authorize the issuance of the RFP.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Wynn.
So two things. So again, can you explain to me what exactly is this May 23rd thing? We keep hearing that date. So I know that we're going to have the attorneys there. We're going to talk about finance, but when do we hear? Or maybe we've heard already, but in terms of the technical part, the engineering part, I mean, in terms of like the actual plant itself, I mean, what if we can't make? Or what if this doesn't pencil out? We can't get the financing. How long can this plant continue to operate in its current state? That'd be the one question I had. And then the other one is, so when we go and put out the RFP for the firm that will actually construct this, will they stay under that $130 million budget that we have, or will they come back and solicit the cost of the work?
Yeah. So in your first part of that question, the city of Portland has recently issued a press release that said that they're stopping work on their current plant. So they believe that they can go, at least for the time being, with their current operation and wait for how this process works out. With having the meeting itself is for if this contract moves forward, is for the attorneys to fly in, for us to, Scott, several others of us to meet, including one of our other consultants that's an expert in all of this, to really talk through all the details of the RFP, talk about what percentage of design we're going to require, how we're going to do that, details such as, and I guess we'll talk about financing now as part of that. There's lots of details that we just have to work out and really get a whiteboard all of this and come up with an agreement together about what we're going to require and ask as part of the RFP, so that when we go out and ask them to start putting together preliminary designs, that we know what we're asking for and we know what the parameters of that's going to be, including our thresholds and all sorts of things that are going to be critical for all of you to make a decision point on. And then as part of that process, they're going to give us information that we're going to be able to, after we release the RFP, that we can then present to the council. And we also, and then there's going to be at some point a decision point that you're all going to have. We don't know what the timeline of that is. We don't know what the details of that is. We can't make these decisions without having the experts in the room to make these decisions together, and that's what we're planning to do. One thing that I think is really important to understand is that this process, especially as we're talking through to all these other P3s, is a very long process, multiple years. We've done it in 5 months. We're still fairly early in this process, and this is a critical piece to this to know what it will look like moving forward definitively.
And Councilor, to answer your question on the technical side, We haven't specified what's in the black box, but we've said that the black box have to have a small footprint and be a good neighbor in terms of odor, aesthetics. And there's probably a couple competing technologies that could fit in that footprint. We've been talking about membrane bioreactors, but there's also a sequencing batch reactor technology. I think the council, if this pans out, you're going to be much more expert in sewage treatment than you ever want to be when you hear it. But that is that step. We've left that, defining what happens in the box, though, left that open in order to get them to sharpen their pencil and advise us as to what's going to work out best to end up with clean water at the end of the pipe, so.
We've pushed the technology as far as, does it work? Now it's, can a deal work, if I
Yeah.
got this right?
Yes.
Technology's at the table that it could work. Okay.
We've also hired Crow Engineering to advise us on that piece of it. But please keep in mind that just because we have them on contract doesn't mean that we're going to spend the extent of their contract. We just need them to be in the room when we're making these decisions, and we're going to be very prudent in how much money we spend, knowing that if this doesn't go, we don't want to have a loss on cost. But we do have to have some in order to set this up correctly, and also to make the right decisions now, so that when we bring it forward to you, we're saying it with all confidence of the information, and that's where we're at right now.
I'm still not hearing though, I'm trying to get a sense of what's our lifetime on this current plant as it is? I mean, do we got 5 years, 10 years, or can it fail at any time, or?
What the city of Portland has said is that there needs to be $133 million worth of investment in the long term. Immediately, they have tens of millions of dollars that need to be spent now in order to work for different permitting issues and all sorts of things. So I don't know if I don't know the exact answer to that, but I just know that they are wanting to move forward, if this wasn't to happen, to solving those issues, so.
I mean, that's something I'd like to see, is to kind of see how much life expectancy we have still left on existing facilities.
I can answer. I've been in quite a few of these meetings. It's not so much end of life. It's more end of technology and the requirements by DEQ of what you can release into the water column. And that plant does not have the technology that can release the new requirements. And those requirements are going to come in place pretty soon.
Right.
So that's why they have to upgrade it. Not so much that it's going to fall apart. They've kept it in great shape because they use it all the time. So they maintenance it all the time. It's got some deficient things. It's a big power user because they have some big pumps. You know, I'd say it's somewhat antiquated for what technology's out there. But the biggest thing is what it disperses into the water column isn't meeting the newest requirements.
This is also in the foothills area too, right? So we got that part, that other.
If I could make a suggestion, perhaps, and excuse me for interrupting, but we have various levels of expertise on this matter. I can tell right now that on the technological side, probably particularly, is there a way of putting together a short white paper that would explain or tell us where to get resources on this technology that we're talking about and some of the issues? I know this would only be 50,000 foot level. We're not talking granular detail, but for me, having sat through the Lake Oswego Tigard Water Partnership project and learning about freshwater treatment, it's quite a detailed process, and I'd like to get sort of a head start on learning a little bit. Is that possible?
Sure. Yes, we can. The one challenge is we don't know exactly what technology is going to be.
No, I
presented yet,
understand that.
But yes, we can. We can give high level.
Whatever there is, because I'm hearing a conversation here where people
Yeah, I mean,
do.
certainly knowing that we have to be in compliance with the DEQ requirements,
Right.
that's very helpful to know.
You know, anything that you can provide us that would give us some context in which to look at this.
There's a lot of technology that's out that we're not using through that plant. There's a lot of chemicals that are in the water column that we didn't have 25 years ago. So, you know, those items have to be cleaned before they hit the Willamette River. So, you know, those are some of the biggest things that they have to go up against.
If I can just, and another hat, we don't want to identify what technologies are required of the proposers. That's the black box that they're supposed to tell us what technologies. I don't want to suggest to our proposers that we're only going down one path of technology.
No, that's not what I'm asking, but if there are articles or something that talks about, in general, what municipalities are doing with leading-edge water treatment, that would be useful. We're not talking about recommending one technology or even noting a particular technology, just to bring us up to speed, those of us who would like to be brought up to speed, on what's going on in the business.
Be happy to do so.
Even just an
Is that
agenda of what you're going to be talking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's fine. I just want to get on the record that we're not targeting a technology. so-
No, absolutely not. Just one little heads up on where to go.
Essentially,
Any
we
other
have to
questions,
create
anybody?
drinking
Can I move to approve the selection of Hawkins, Delafield, and Woods to provide specialized legal services for procurement and agreement relating to a replacement wastewater treatment plant?
Second?
All right, we've had a motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yes.
Counselor Kolhoff.
Just a couple things. These aren't questions. I held off. As I understood, well, I read your email. You said, don't discuss when there are questions.
Right.
Some of us read the emails. I don't know. I want
Thank
to
you,
say
Counselor.
that I'm absolutely on board with you getting the lawyer. And I thought that the amount of the law firm, the amount is what I had heard was about right for this kind of a project. And that their function isn't so much, from my perspective, being a lawyer, to know the technology, but know the issues. And in that regard, we're very well served. And they will help formulate your RFQ with those issues in mind. So I thought that was super good. And then the other is just to say that if the owner's rep is following along as well, I think you're going to be very successful, and I'm excited for this process and that you took us seriously, that we weren't just going to jump in there and in May start digging a new wastewater treatment. So this is good. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions, comments, discussion?
I do have one comment. Again, it's just, I guess I'm not an attorney, so I guess $600,000 does seem like a lot of money to me. But as far as like looking at the criteria that we use to evaluate the firms, cost was the least consideration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But they were, their cost
Were
was
they
good.
within
And their
reason?
references say they did not abuse it. They certainly got value for their money.
They were the least blended hourly rate. They all quoted on blended rates, but they were the least hourly, but cost was
they were
was the
okay.
least factor. We
Okay.
thought experience and capability was higher than cost.
Further? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we've got a consent agenda. We'll take an item 7.1 off the consent agenda, but we've got items 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, and 7.5, and 7.6 and 7.7. Any of those, anybody else wants taken off besides 7.1?
Move to approve the consent agenda minus 7.1.
We just need to comment on one. We don't need to pull.
Second. And then.
So we just need to comment on 7.2. John
All
and I
right,
do.
if you have a comment, go ahead.
Are we
Yeah.
pulling that? Let me amend that.
Wait a minute, no, he's just making a
It's just,
comment.
it's an announcement. so.
On 7.2, a contract award for wastewater lift station generator project. The Department of Public Works reached out to our neighborhood because the two in question, there's three that are going to be part of this project, we're going to be in the neighborhood's common areas, the HOA, the homeowner association's common areas. They asked for input, as a good Public Works department would, about location and look and where they should go. I was part of discussions with 7 or 8 neighbors, and I just wanted to declare it was a global thing. It was for all 90 homes. It was to work it out in the right location, so, just for the record.
Right, and I think the analysis is that whether there is a conflict, there's the class exception that, from what I understand from Councilor Lamont, that his home isn't adjacent to this or anything, so he's no more affected than the other 90 members of the HOA. Therefore, it's likely a large enough class exception that it probably wouldn't even need to declare a potential conflict of interest. But he wanted to at least put that on the record.
Okay, great.
And
Thank you.
And I guess I should say that I was part of that group, but I was not on city council before, but I will be voting on this, and we did recommend it to the noise move closer to my current house, so.
All right, so we got a motion made and seconded on the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, let's take item 7.1. Councilor Kohlhoff, you wanted that taken off the consent agenda?
So I did. This seems odd. So we voted to send this over to be on the ballot, which it is. And are we saying that in the event that that passes, that we don't already have an ordinance that authorizes the 2-year? And therefore, we're trying to like zip in here to make sure that there is an ordinance in place in the event that they vote yes on this?
Pretty much. What the fact is that we have code that currently says we'll adopt a 1-year budget.
Right.
And so in the event that that passes, you want to have the flexibility in your code as well. So your code would allow the council to adopt either a 1 or 2-year budget. So in the event that the charter amendment passes or whatever, you may go ahead. So.
But if this were not voted yes tonight, and the people voted on their ballot yes, it's going to be vitiated because we don't have in place an ordinance that says that they could have 2 years?
No, because the charter then would allow the city manager to present a budget for either 1 or 2 years. Your code then would still tell you to do it for 1 year. So presenting a 1-year budget does not violate the charter, even as is amended.
This is a
The
clean.
charter would give you the flexibility. Now, this ordinance will also give you the flexibility at both levels.
I see. Okay.
So I'd make a motion that we adopt item 7, I'm sorry. Do you have a question?
7.1.
7.1, which is
It's a
ordinance
statement.
2818.
Second.
Any further discussion, questions? All right, all in favor?
I just had a question. I mean, on an ordinance like this, when we have it on the ballot, there's no campaigning or anything for it. We just hope that the people understand it. I've gotten several emails to ask me yes or no, and I said,
Well,
I have a standard email that
If you wish, we can certainly do a walk and knock and have outside.
yeah. Okay, gotcha.
No, in general, we don't have signs that we put up for our ordinances or levies, for that matter. I don't even know what the mechanism of that would be.
Well, hopefully the explanation in the voter's pamphlet helps people make their decision.
Right. And for those of you watching, please vote yes for this ordinance.
Okay, you've just
Violated
given
all the
information
rules.
to 5 people.
Our wives.
All right.
Okay, we got a motion made and seconded to adopt ordinance 2818. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
I am opposed,
so-
no.
Thank you. All right, moving on, information from council.
Oh,
Councilor Kohlhoff.
sorry, being chatty Catholic. May 14th is the event over at, by the 50-plus advisory over at Mary's Woods. And there would be, it's free, it'd be very exciting, starting at 9 through 12:30, and we'll be begun with our mayor. But the group in the 50-plus advisory board, I guess, they're very excited about this, and I really would like to see a huge turnout.
Okay. Councilor Lamont.
On behalf of the Arts Council of Lake Oswego and the Rotary folks that volunteered Saturday for the sculpture cleaning, I want to thank everybody that showed up. It helps keep our city beautiful and clean and keeping our gallery without walls going, and especially there were a lot of Rotary folks there, so thank you.
And along those lines, on Saturday, we had the Walk for Water, which was very successful as well. So it was a busy day. Councilor Mans.
Well, after that, I feel like a bit of a buzzkill. I was just going to report that the Lake Oswego Tiger Water Partnership met, and all is running extremely well, and we will meet again in July. Also, I am currently, not this moment, but today, tomorrow, and Thursday, attending Urbanism Next, a conference down at PSU, which is, today was very, very interesting. I'm learning a lot about various smart city initiatives, and we'll bring back key pieces of some of this once the conference is over, and I've synthesized it. How's that for an Urbanism Next word? Thank you.
Councilor Wendland.
I just want to say that this weekend, Assistant City Manager Phelan and I were at the Lake Oswego Chamber of Commerce retreat for their executive board and had a very productive 1.5 day thing. And I wanted to thank the city for letting us occupy the new Operations Center conference room. Great facility, and that's exactly what we should be using civic groups. It's just a great space. So for everybody in the city that put up with us and cleaned up after us and all that kind of stuff, thank you. And it was a great retreat in the Public Works building.
Councilor Wen.
Just wanted to say that May is actually Asian Pacific Islander Month, and it's recognized as a federal designation. And so I had a chance to speak with Bonneville Power Administration group today, and just talking about how we are recognizing our diversity and really creating a sense of inclusion in all the things we do at the federal level and also at the state level. And I think that it would be just a good idea in the future, possibly, as we go from Black History Month to Asian Pacific Islander Month to some of the other things that might be good to include possibly in our DEI calendar, just to make a note of that.
Great. Anything else? Okay, well then, this concludes the televised portion of the meeting. We're now going to go into executive session. Mr. Powell, you have to tell us what's going on.
I will. Thank you, Mayor. The City Council will now be going into executive session under the authority of ORS 192.660 subsection 2E to conduct deliberations with persons designated to negotiate real property transactions, and also under subsection 2F to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection. The representatives of news media and designated staff will be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on or otherwise disclose any of the deliberations or anything said about these subjects during the executive session, except to state the general announcement that I have previously. No final decision will be made in an executive session, and at the end of that session, the City Council will return to an open session and welcome any audience back into the room.
Okay.
Are we staying here, or are we?
We'll be staying in the
We can do
room.
that here.
We'll be staying in the room tonight. If we could give Mr. Butler a few minutes to shut down the television
We
system.
don't have very many staff, so while they're doing that, I'd recommend just using the little room.
Okay.
Is that okay, Amber?
It's fine.
Because it does take a while to shut down the video.
Okay.